All right, so we just exploring ChatGPT and online assessments. So if y'all recall, probably around February or March when Microsoft purchased ChatGPT, and it really blew up, and it became evident that this was going to be something that was going to be very accessible and have a lot of interest in development and future capabilities. As you might imagine, in the higher education sphere, we had a lot of individuals talking about what was this going to mean for the future of assessments, and how are we going to police this? How's this going to affect higher education? So our team at the Distance Learning Institute, one day in a team meeting, we decided to take it upon ourselves to just look into this. We wanted to see if we could create some kind of an instructional design model, maybe something similar to Bloom's with relation to AI, so we can kind of gauge its capabilities and see how we can design our assessments so that we're kind of curbing the students to commit violations in academic integrity with regards to cheating, having the AI complete their assessments for them, or having the AI kind of be complementary to them, to be used as a tool so that they can create original work while not necessarily having to stay clear away from ChatGPT and other AI engines. So Brianna and I did some research, especially Brianna. She did a wonderful job compiling some of the capabilities of ChatGPT. We did some extensive testing to just kind of see what it do, so that we could inform some fellow department chairs and instructors at the University of Miami with regards to what this thing can really do and how they can design their assessments to be effective and not necessarily be overwhelmed by AI. So this is the same presentation that we delivered to some of those departments and other folks at the university, and now we're going to give it to you. So a little introduction. So some of our colleagues and some other folks that we work with are calling this a crisis. So we're going to address the crisis. We're going to review and review the basic principles of student assessment. We're going to go over Bloom's taxonomy. So if you're not familiar with Bloom's, we're going to go over that instructional design model and how we can develop student assessment. And we're going to do that to kind of create a ground, kind of like a foundation, so that we can take that into consideration when Brianna starts going over AIs like ChatGPT and its capabilities, what it can do right now, and how we might design assessments to be effective. And then we have a DLI AI resource web page. So as you can imagine, all of this is very new. Research is ongoing. The capabilities of AI change hour to hour, day to day, week to week, month to month. It might be different a year from now. So that is a website that is run by our team that we are continuing to refresh as we do more research, as we continue to look at the capabilities of ChatGPT and other AI engines and how that might affect student assessment. So I kind of like the idea of addressing it as a crisis. So if you're not familiar with the Chinese word for crisis, it is made up of two characters. So the first character in the Chinese word for crisis represents danger. So we've already kind of started to allude what that danger might be: academic integrity concerns. Will students ever generate original work ever again if AI bots can complete their work for them? Does that mean that they're never going to think critically ever again? And that, of course, there's a concern that means that they're not applying the course material, which is ultimately the main concern. Because, as it's said, tell me and I'll forget, teach me and I may remember, involve me and I learn, right? But if the AI engine is doing their work for them, are they even applying the course material? So is any of that knowledge that we're trying to impart onto them being converted into that long-term memory? And how will they be able to use that information moving forward if they never actually applied any of the course material in their assessments? Now, however, the second character in the Chinese word for crisis is opportunity, but also the opportunity for students to learn a new tool. There was once a point when the calculator was new, when Microsoft Word, Excel, PowerPoint was new. So it is an opportunity for students to learn a new tool, to not necessarily have their work done for them, but to incorporate the use of that tool Much like we see Microsoft Office Suite as a regular tool that is used in the workforce today, there may be a day where the students of today are regularly using AI engines to complement their work in their professional careers. In which case, that we might want them to learn how to use this thing so that they can be marketable when they go start looking for jobs. And it also might help us to redesign, to rethink the way that we design assessments, because this is a tool that also instructors can use to bounce ideas off the ChatGPT, create outlines, kind of expand your ideas, which is what we're going to be talking about when we get into the capabilities of ChatGPT and kind of what it does. When we first, we have updated this material based on some of the time that has passed since we first delivered this presentation to our folks at the University of Miami. But when this was first coming out, people had no idea what it did. And some of you may or may not be familiar exactly with what ChatGPT can or cannot do. So as we move forward and talk about its capabilities, we'll see that it's not necessarily a butler that's just going to generate your work for you. It is a tool that you need to learn how to use, and based on how well you can use that tool is going to dictate how good the results are that the bot is going to generate for you and the work that students would be submitting, which Brianna will get into. But we'll take a step back now and just review what are the core principles of student assessment. So they need to be specific. When we talk about specific, what are we assessing them on? What do we want them to learn? What should be the end goal of that assessment? Because as I was mentioning before, the foundation of learning is applying that materials to convert that knowledge from the short term of doing it in class to the long term of well after they've exited the classroom, they still have that knowledge in their brain. So what is that knowledge that we want to put in their brains long term, well after they've left the classroom? So our assessment needs to be specific, and we can do that by starting off with just writing learning goals for what we want to accomplish with that assessment. So it does require also that the students apply course material. So we want that material to align. So, oftentimes, how many times have you heard a student say, the test was nothing like what I learned in class? And that just might be a case of just misalignment with the assessment and what's being taught in class. So we want the very specific course material that we as instructors and as instructional designers are presenting and imparting to these students to reflect the course material. The assessment should reflect that course material. And then when we design these assessments, we want to be taking into consideration that we want to design them using HOTS, not LOTS. So higher order thinking skills, not lower order thinking skills. And that's where we jump into Bloom's taxonomy. So some of you are probably very familiar with Bloom's. For those of you who aren't, Bloom's taxonomy is just basically an instructional design model that can help you design assessments with specific learning goals in mind based on the material that you're trying to teach and what it is that you're trying to accomplish with that assessment. So if you start at the top of Bloom's taxonomy, we'll see that these are higher order thinking skills right here. Assessments that involve doing things like creating, evaluating, analyzing here at the top of the taxonomy. If we look at some of the examples in each of those categories, we use Bloom's digital taxonomy since we do a lot of online coursework, and the AI bot material is going to involve a lot of digital coursework. So creating a blog, filming something, podcasting, directing, evaluating, like students evaluating each other, testing things out, reviewing results and creating some sort of analysis based off of that. And then on the other end of the spectrum, we of course have the lower order thinking skills. So things like remembering, just basic understanding, recalling dates, things of that nature are lower order thinking skill assessments. So we just had the 4th of July recently. So an example of a lower order thinking skill assessment would be, when was the Declaration of Independence signed? July 4, 1776, versus evaluating or creating something new based on the significance of what happened on July 4, 1776. So we might ask instead, what was the global impact as a result of the signing of the Declaration of Independence on July 4, 1776, right? So those would be an example of a lower order thinking skill assessment versus a higher order thinking skill assessment. And it's just if you're already familiar with this, it's just important to take this into consideration as we move forward in this presentation when we start talking about the capabilities of AI, because it is going to be very much based on the student's ability to prompt the engine to do what the student wants it to do. It's not going to be something very simple where a student can very lackadaisically just use this AI bot that's going to generate amazing work for them. That is not going to be the case at all. So if we continue to just refer to Bloom's taxonomy when we design assessments that are specific, applying course material and using hots, not lots, it's going to force the student to create more original work, which is then thinking critically, which is going to be them using the course material. And it's if we ask them personal questions, what's your take on whatever subject matter you're teaching, and where they have to create that original work, it prevents the issues regarding academic integrity where, using the AI chatbot is going to be no different than if they asked a roommate for assistance or, seek some other form of assistance with generating their work. So if we take into consideration effective assessment design using something like Bloom's taxonomy, then we turn the AI into something no more than just asking your buddy for assistance. And then it becomes a tool at that point, and we can strategize how we might want to design our assessments with higher order thinking skills in mind, but in a way that allows the students to incorporate AI in certain spots so that they learn how to use the tool. They're still applying the material. This is still original work, and it doesn't violate any sort of academic integrity. So I'm going to pass this over to Brianna now. She's going to go over some of the findings that she had when she tested ChatGPT herself. Take it away, Brianna.
Thank you, Nick. And echoing Nick's thoughts earlier, thank you all for sharing this time with us today. Before we get into the research, I just want to go over quickly how ChatGPT works without getting too technical. So I'm sure we've all heard about it being a language model, but what does that mean exactly? Basically, the model analyzes text that the user gives it, and it will generate a human-like response in the form of a dialogue based on the data that it has been trained on. So currently, there are two versions of ChatGPT out there, GPT 3.5 and GPT 4. So GPT 3.5 is the free version, and OpenAI does not limit the user to a certain number of prompts per hour. The user will generally get a quick response because the model has been trained to perform less complex tasks. And OpenAI states on their website that GPT 3.5 is for those everyday administrative tasks. Unlike GPT-4, which is the paid version, GPT 3.5 only receives input text, and it will have it will generate an output text or code depending on what you ask it to do. GPT-4 has more improved reasoning and creativity, which is why it could be a little bit slower, and users are limited to a certain number of prompts per hour. Another new feature that came out recently is the plugins. So GPT-4 has plugins, which is just a communication with third-party applications. And so the user can get real-time information based on that communication. So for example, Expedia is a plugin, and it will communicate with Expedia if you ask it what hotels are near my next vacation. And you can enter in the dates you're looking for. It will generate links that will direct you to Expedia's website. So for the rest of this presentation, I want us to remember this key takeaway. ChatGPT is only as good as the prompt it has been given. So this means that if the user does not give a specific and well thought out prompt, they will not receive a quality answer from the system. And we'll get into why this is important in the following slides. Now, Nick and I have been asked this question a lot, and we've even wondered about it ourselves when we started our research. Is there a way to detect AI written content using a tool or spotting it with some clues? And because ChatGPT uses patterns that it's seen in other texts, the written responses may come off a bit formal, generic, wordy, or repetitive. Some responses may appear to lack some context as well. There are many tools out there that are advertising they can spot AI-generated text, including one that was designed by the same company, OpenAI. These tools are AIs themselves, and so they do have a bit of a margin of error within them, and they have flagged human-generated text as AI-generated. So keeping this in mind, we don't recommend relying on these tools 100%. We do recommend familiarizing yourself with the AI, the tools, but more importantly, it's about getting to the principles we're talking about with Bloom's taxonomy. If we go to the next slide. Before we jump into the refining concepts for our assessments, let's take a look at ChatGPT's shortcomings as they stand today. So OpenAI tells us that ChatGPT does not have knowledge past 2021 because the data it was trained on does not include current events. And when Nick and I asked GPT-4 to tell us the latest updates on the Russian and Ukraine war, it did respond telling us that it can't provide those real-time updates. We should check a news source. Another limitation is that the language model lacks creativity, originality that's comparable to humans. So ChatGPT will not be producing that quality of work. GPT-4 is more creative than GPT 3.5, but when we compare it to a human's level, it doesn't compare. ChatGPT cannot also evaluate itself directly. It relies on humans to provide feedback and its developers to help it improve in terms of performance and accuracy. So like we mentioned a couple slides back, the prompt that we give ChatGPT helps determine the quality of the response we get. So users may find themselves asking the system a couple of times a question to kind of narrow down and get something close to what they would like. And ChatGPT may provide a lot of information within the time frame that it was trained on, but it does not tell the user where the sources came from. So whoever wants to use that information has to also look for reliable sources elsewhere. And then lastly, OpenAI warns us of ChatGPT's inaccuracy and biased responses. So developers are working on improving these aspects, but users may find that the current models don't hit the mark quite yet. And Nick and I did experience this when we were doing our research. We asked the chat box to create a code for us for a PowerPoint, and then we can convert it on an external tool. And the code ended up being incorrect at first, and it did take a little bit of time for the system to generate that code for us. So if we go to the next slide, we'll see a screenshot of the presentation we obtained once we converted it. So we started off asking ChatGPT to outline it for us. We wanted to create a presentation on ChatGPT, and we wanted it to create bullet points for us. And then once it did that, we asked it to generate a code, and we could convert this with an external tool into a PPT file. And there was a video of this on our resource website that Nick mentioned early on. So you can see how we went through the process. We were able to play around with the background and text color with the code. But if, say, a student or a user would want to create a stellar presentation with graphics and really detailed talking points, they would need to use other AI tools and even edit it themselves. Okay, so next slide. So what are the concepts that we should keep in mind when we are refining and designing our online assessments? We need to focus, as Nick mentioned, on those higher order thinking skills and deep learning tasks. For Bloom's taxonomy, that creating, evaluating, analyzing. OpenAI's aim was to create and use these systems to make our lives easier. So this means we can't teach and test students to do those everyday tasks. We have to guide them to become those creators and those forward thinkers. And this requires them to have active participation in the course. We must have them form their own conclusions based on the readings or sources that they find and review on their own. And we must have them practice problem solving, evaluating one another, even evaluating the AI systems. And they must also think about why the response is the response. So the system can tell them this is the answer to this question, but if we train them to think on the process, how did we get from point A to point B, we can help them out a great deal. Now, this can happen by limiting AI or incorporating it in our courses. We received many questions about whether ChatGPT should be used in the classroom or if it's even compatible with academic integrity. And we feel this is not for us to determine or answer as educators and learning experts. The choice is ours, and we set the parameters for our own courses. As the system stands today, we can limit ChatGPT or we can incorporate it in our online courses with the principles that we're discussing today. So for those who wish to limit its use, we can leverage ChatGPT's limitations with Bloom's taxonomy and require our students to create original work of their own. Perhaps a research proposal, a big project that is going to take them a couple modules to go through and plan in steps. And the possibilities are endless. We can have students film themselves and present at a physical location that they can share with the class, or interview a specific person that's not well known before 2021. We can also have them discuss and ponder current events in the field, or have them turn in a personal account or experience. So if they do use ChatGPT, it's not going to provide that personal opinion or account. It's just going to give them something to go off of, but they still need to work on generating that personal experience. We can also require them to submit sources for all assignments, since they have to go looking elsewhere and validate those sources. And another interesting strategy is having them work with examples that are unique to your own course. They can't find it anywhere else. And one last point on detailed rubrics: it makes it much harder for a student to turn in some arbitrary submission if they have to follow those parameters to get full credit in your course. Now, if we want to incorporate the tool in our courses, we can begin with its strengths. In our research, Nick and I found that ChatGPT was an excellent brainstorming tool. It was great for mind mapping, generating ideas, creating outlines. And we can help our students within this process if they're going to be thought leaders. Ideas evolve and they get better and they narrow down. So if we have them use this tool to go through the process, this can help them a great deal when they enter the workforce or go to a different class. Chances are students are going to need to edit whatever work ChatGPT gives them. So this also builds that skill that they can take on with them once they leave the class. I read an article the other day that AIs will not be replacing humans, but humans who use AI will. And so if we think that our students are not going to be using these tools once they leave your class or once they enter the workplace, we're mistaken, because in the world, even OpenAI's intention was for us to use these. So if they learn these skills in the class, it may benefit them later on. As we mentioned, evaluation was listed as a higher order thinking skill, about the second highest. And it's a great opportunity to have students evaluate the AI's response as part of an assignment. So they can check for accuracy, provide their feedback on that response. What is it missing? What can make it better? And deep learning, as I mentioned before, takes place when students are figuring out the process of things. So if the AI did generate a response for them, how did it come to that answer? In the example of a code, there was one character that was missing. So if the student was able to spot that and see that from ChatGPT's response, it was able to evaluate and understand why that was not the answer. Okay, sorry, my screen got a little bit. Okay, AI systems like ChatGPT, they're only getting better. So these considerations are an ongoing journey, and we may come to find that some of the information we shared with you all today may be outdated in a few days, months, or years. OpenAI has released plans to partner with Khan Academy and other organizations to create more personalized learning for their users. They have also expressed their aim in improving the systems to take on those everyday tasks so that users can focus more of their attention on what truly matters to them. So this is only getting more, it's only progressing a little bit more. The world of higher education is changing, but it grants us the opportunity to empower our students to become tomorrow's creators, evaluators, and analysts. Rather than spending their time on simple, busy tasks, they can focus more of their attention on becoming those thought leaders and innovators we mentioned. So thank you once again for attending our presentation. I hope this information was helpful to you. I'm going to hand it back to Nick to close us off and review the key points.
Thank you, Brianna. We very much appreciate your detailed explanation of your findings and your experience in ChatGPT. So just going back to the key points of what we were talking about with regards to artificial intelligence and student assessment. So there's dangers and there's opportunities, and it's important to consider both when you're designing your assessments. So we refer to Bloom's taxonomy and using HOTS not LOTS, those high order thinking skills versus low order thinking skill assessments. So going back to Brianna's example regarding how we tried to get AI to make this specific presentation for us when we first created it. We wanted to see what it could do if it was going to make something beautiful for us. And it made that very just bland, white background, black text presentation. And we couldn't really do much more with it. And it was because we're just not experienced with the tool yet. We didn't know really how to prompt it and how to get it to do what we were trying to accomplish. So if you take that into consideration when you're developing your assessments, then you might be able to be comfortable with the fact that as you create assessments with more higher order thinking skills, the less that a student is going to incorporate the AI. And if they do, it's going to take a lot more effort, in which case the student's doing the work anyway, because they're prompting the tool rather than trying to get, for lack of a better way to put it, a robot to make their work for them, right? So we encourage you all to familiarize yourself with AI. Try using it yourselves, kind of like what we did, to try to see what this thing can do and how that might affect assessments. So we have some first-hand knowledge on what it's like to try to get the AI to do things for us with whatever it is we're trying to accomplish. And we set those accomplishments. Imagine how much more difficult it might be for a student if you're the one determining the outcome of what an assignment should be, and then they have to go try to figure out how to make the ChatGPT work for them if they're trying to use it for academic misconduct purposes. But upside, it's an assessment that we talked about. If you want to incorporate AI, doing something like evaluate the AI. Maybe you can ask your students, hey, go into ChatGPT, ask it this question based on some, whatever topic that you're teaching, and you want to create that higher order thinking skill assessment, and have ask ChatGPT this specific question regarding the course material, and analyze its response, and then the students are both using the AI, but they're still generating original work with a higher order thinking skill assessment, which is to the next point of our key points, which is that AI is not original. It's a learning tool. So anything that it spits out is because somebody at one point put it in, and then it saves those responses to use them again in the future. So another interesting thing that you can kind of do to familiarize with yourself and realize the lack of originality of AI is create your own assessment and then try to submit it yourself as a student, right? And then see what it kind of spits back out at you. And then you can try to do it both ways. You can do it with like lazy prompts and see what kind of work you get ahead of time, as well as do some really elaborate specific prompts. And then again, you can see what a really well-written prompt might give you. And then if students start submitting those kinds of outcomes to you as submissions to their assessments, and you can kind of see, oh, I've seen this because I did it myself. So you can kind of begin to be your own AI detector, right? But at the same time, you get more ideas regarding the capabilities of this thing and how you can either try to curb its use by students or incorporate its use by students. And then we're going to have some of these tips and tricks as current findings make themselves available, or as ongoing research reviews new findings on ChatGPT and other AIs with regards to their future capabilities. We're going to be having that on our support page. So we're going to be continually refreshing that. We have that page here. So we have an example here of our DLI resource. Looks like this is a screen recording and where you can find it. So if you go to the link that we'll provide, you click on that navigating AI tab. You'll see an example of us actually trying to create this presentation on ChatGPT, as well as some of the other points that we have made regarding creating effective assessments using ChatGPT and other AI engines. There's some resources with Bloom's in there. We're actually working on our own Bloom's resource page that we are developing ourselves to put on our DLI resource page as well. So look in the future for a separate page specifically just related to Bloom's taxonomy. We're in the process of getting that put together. And to just we hope that this is just shed a light if you're not aware on how ChatGPT works. That essentially our findings are that it's like a calculator or like Microsoft Word or PowerPoint or Excel. It's another tool to be learned. It's not going to generate original for students, and ultimately, I believe, and Brianna does as well, that the instructor is still ultimately in control with regards to the student outcomes of assessments with the way that they choose to design their assessments. So it's all going to be based off of what your learning goals are, aligning it with your course material, and having the students apply it through those higher order thinking skill assessments. And then as you familiarize yourselves with AI, you can determine to what degree you want any specific assignment to involve or not involve artificial intelligence. And it's a new normal that potentially might be coming, but regardless, I think that effective assessment design is still the key here to accomplish whatever your goals are, whether it's avoid AI or incorporate AI. So that's our presentation. So we'll open it up now for questions and comments, and we'll be providing anything else that you all might want in the chat box here at this time.